Hello, everyone. For those of you that are new to TezTalks Radio, my name is Marissa True, and I'm joined by my co-host, Stu Elms. Hey, Stu.
Hi, Marissa. The sun is almost up here. I'm ready to rock. How are you?
Well, the sun is gone on my end, so I'm ready to go to bed eventually. This week's episode, we have a very special guest. We are going to welcome none other than the president of the Tezos Foundation himself, Roman Schnider. Hey, Roman, how are you today?
Hey, Marissa. Hey, Stu. Well, thanks for the invite. I'm doing well, and I reckon we have more or less all time zones now because we're, just kind of early afternoon, so the sun is still up.
Give everybody a little bit of context. Roman has dedicated his considerable energies to forwarding the Tezos cause as the Tezos Foundation president. He's here to give us all some insights into exactly what the Tezos Foundation is doing to drive the ecosystem forward in 2022 and beyond.
So to start off, Roman, of course, we in the ecosystem know you very well, especially by name, but you are very much a man of mystery to many in the rest of the world. So a great starting point is your origin story. So how did you end up in the world of blockchain? And more importantly, what was your journey to actually becoming the president of the Tezos Foundation?
It's not really a good sign to be a man of mystery, but I think it kind of expresses what we try to do is, at the foundation, we try to deliver as an organization, as part of a fantastic ecosystem, and we're one player of them. And so, not to put yourself in front of all activities is sometimes also a design choice. So again, it's fantastic to be here. And, when I started in 2018 actually, but then 19 at the foundation, I kind of stated that, I want to kind of increase the transparency at that time. And so I think it's great to have the opportunity to talk about what we're doing here. My background, you're talking with a very boring auditor today, so don't expect too many jokes. Background is finance. I was working for banks for quite a while, and then I started at PwC in 2005. I was in Switzerland for a while, then went to Germany for 2 years. Back in Zurich, I did my CPA, kind of like the auditor's degree, if you want so. And then I was in Australia for 3 years. Don't think I still have the accent, but I had a wonderful time in Sydney with my family. Came back to Zurich and I did quite a bit of kind of products banking, so investment banking type activities. And there is not so much investment banking in Switzerland. Switzerland is predominantly a place where you hold your wealth. It's not a products place. And so crypto was really interesting, right? We saw the first kind of crypto shops coming up. I heard about Bitcoin before. To be honest, didn't really understand a lot. I heard relatively poor presentation about mining, and I felt like I have no idea what this person is talking about at that time. And then here we had, companies like Bitcoin Suisse and Lücke, kind of the first brokers, if you want so, and they were thinking about, legal situations and whether they need a license or not. And that was exactly what I was doing. So I was in banking. I worked for the FINMA, so the Swiss regulator, that about to audit licensing or licensed firms, but also to advise them. And so kind of realized that there is also a huge product angle in there. This was pre-DeFi type of times, but you could see how you could build products, and that was really interesting. And started to have my first wallet, started to buy my first couple of fractions of Bitcoin. Didn't know Tezos at that time, and then was approached by members of the Tezos Foundation at that time about a piece of advice first that then kind of translated into an audit. And so the Tezos Foundation was the first large crypto company that was audited in Switzerland by PwC. And it was quite a big thing, also globally, because globally Switzerland was quite ahead from a legal regulatory perspective, mainly also because of the fundraiser and ICO hypes during 2017. And so we had quite a presence, and also globally when we kind of created that crypto audit team. The Tezos Foundation allowed us to do an assessment And you can imagine, I mean, not being in crypto, I mean, this assessment and an assessment or trying to get our heads around the Tezos project at that time was incredibly difficult. I mean, there were lots of questions. Honestly, we didn't really have the capabilities that the Tezos project had. So to assess the tech was nearly impossible for us at that time. So the questions really were around, what are the legal regulatory risks? I mean, AML KYC was a big topic. What is the sustainability of the funding? Is everything kind of secure, or was something lost? And then therefore, are there risks? And the third element is, what is the soundness of the technology? And so the only way we could kind of use to assess the soundness was also to see it launch. And so when the beta, you may see that when you look at the timeline, when beta went live in June 2018, that was also the time where we actually approved the audit mandate, because we kind of saw that it had been delivered and people actually used it, and we could see how the reactions were. And it was an amazing journey. And so I did the audit for the first year of the Tezos Foundation. That was maybe 50% of my job at that time. And then at that time, Hubertus approached me and said they were looking for a CFO or for an employee that looks after the finances. And so I felt like that's the best opportunity to get more proximity to a project that I found incredibly exciting.
So then, of course, the Tezos blockchain has many clear merits worthy of attention. It's designed to evolve. There's the energy efficiency, and you very much had a privileged view before even the beta launch to actually see how this technology was developing and then see it actually grow over the course of time. So what was it about Tezos specifically that made you think, no, I want to spend more time working on this technology and being behind the scenes here and kind of helping build out this ecosystem?
I mean, emotionally at that time, there were a couple of events that really impressed me. I mean, don't know to what extent you, for example, spend time with Nomadic Labs before they were called Nomadic Labs. I mean, it was a very early time, and there was a lot of uncertainty. And you went to Paris and you met the team, and they were like, immediately excited about the technology and what they were building. And that excitement, in a situation where many people of us would have said, hey, well, do I get my next salary? Where do we stand? That was amazing to see, and you could feel that they're really onto something. And then you start to read, you start to see some of the basic concepts, and they make sense to you. You meet members. I mean, I had the chance to talk to Arthur at that time, obviously to different board members, and you feel like, okay, I think there is an element where I can help, because at the beginning, a lot of it was organizationally driven, right? I mean, how to build an operation, how to build it effectively, how to make sure the finances are under control, how to make sure that you're no longer backward oriented and you can look forward. So you feel that there is an edge where you as a non-tech person can actually give something to the project. And at the same time, there is something out there that you don't really understand because of your background, but that seems really exciting. And that's how I luckily ended up here.
I can totally relate to that. If we can take a step back for a moment, for those who might not necessarily be familiar, can you share in your own words what the mandate of the Tezos Foundation is and its role in the ecosystem?
I think, the simplest way to look at it is if you look at the base tasks of, there is an asset management mandate. So we call it endowment management. So to make sure that the funds that were raised are safe, that they're allocated in a way that that remains skin in the game, that keeps us vested in a very important ecosystem, but at the same time also gives us the security that if situations happen, for example, like those that we've recently had, that we are not in a panic mode, that we have sufficient liquidity. So that endowment management is one part, and then obviously use that endowment to further the Tezos project, to invest into for-profit companies, to enable the build out of the ecosystem with grants. That's kind of like the most basic way to look at it. If you could look at it slightly different, or sometimes you kind of try to step away. I mean, the foundation as a vehicle in a fantastically colorful and vibrant ecosystem has some form of special role by not being directly linked to a product. So there is some, as a Swiss person, I don't want to say neutrality, but there is some elements of the possibility to negotiate and bring people together without having a conflict of interest. I think that is interesting. And I think another role that we have, to connect and to build up, to enable things to the extent we can. And then obviously, but you mentioned it before, Stu, I mean, not all of us may be familiar with the entirety of the program. It's important, right? We are one entity. And it's important that we state it all the time. We're one entity, and we do not control. We have a mandate. We try to be as diligent and as successful in what we have to do so that we all are successful with Tezos, but we do not control. And that's who we are.
So in terms of sort of working toward achieving that mandate, the primary mechanisms would be the grants and connecting this entity with this entity and doing networking things.
Yeah, I think the first goal is maybe you need to have an operation that is stable. Very simply, at the foundation, you're, by the way, in the foundation offices. So we have a floor here in Zug. We try to have people on board. I mean, we're larger than we've been before. We have a finance, we have a legal, we have an IT, and we have an operations team. IT is predominantly the bakers and a little bit of IT infrastructure. So what I mean by that is, if you don't have a stable organization, everything will take longer. Right? You ask for a grant, it will not take 6 weeks, but maybe even longer. You ask for an investment and you have no one to assess it. So first of all, to have that stability around your organization. And then, yes, you have grants, you have investments, but you have other assets as well. I mean, you have arguably the wealth that we have is an asset, right? I mean, some discussions just happen easier. We may have certain assets from activities we've done, and these assets that we have, to use all of them consciously in a way that ideally creates the highest ROI. And there we are sometimes sure that what we're doing is the right things, and sometimes we're guessing because we don't know, right? But then what we try to do is, and that's what we've really institutionalized here, is then we do it together, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. It seems like I've recently sort of delved into the history of Tezos as for part of the writing work that I do, and it seems like Tezos has made an awful lot of progress over the years. Like, the on-chain governance model appears to function. We've already seen 9 upgrades. We've got a 10th on the way. New applications are being rolled out pretty regularly at this point. From your perspective, as you said, a non-tech person, how does the Tezos ecosystem measure up in this industry?
I think you mentioned very good points. I mean, thinking back about looking at the first couple of upgrades. I mean, obviously Athens was a very small one, but Babylon already proved to be quite tricky, and Carthage, I mean, it was hard and it took a long time. And I think it's a big achievement that we've not only managed to bring that logic of steady upgrades into, to institutionalize delivering those upgrades as an ecosystem, and that is amazing. I mean, I don't, from the top of my head, I couldn't say another project that is able to do that, and we can be very proud of that. Then, looking at it, I mean, the project is live since June 2018. I mean, the Tezos protocol, and it has been maintained very well over those times. We had incredible stability, the validations and the required assets that we needed to build up in order to not, lose those advantages were always well maintained. And that's I think a fantastic. I mean, this kind of, this sturdy infrastructure, this long-term project. I think it's important that we can talk about long-term views later, because I think it's quite interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, I believe that what we're building here is a blockchain, and a blockchain that needs to have that stability and decentralization, then obviously, combined with that, top-notch technology, so that we can also forget the blockchain and say, it's in there somewhere. It deals with me. It deals with the things that happen, but I don't have to worry about it. And I mean, it's not so long ago, and I'm not a fan of looking backwards, but sometimes it is healthy to do it. It's not so long ago that we've really been able to look forward and to push projects. And I remember some of the frustrations when we looked at DeFi at the time, when our smart contracts were still not able to actually have the entire, deal with the entire complexity of DeFi projects. And now we have wonderful verticals, especially in the art space. I'm not an art specialist, I'm a person that looks at things and likes them or not. But the fact that I can actually, look at different things, and if I like artists, I can have some form of new communications. I can even get something that is fantastic. Large-scale projects we've seen, and obviously we try to put all of these events into our biannuals, like Interpop is doing fantastic. The fact that I don't own a Dogami Golden Bone, but I've seen a couple of them. I mean, it's amazing what these guys do. It's great. I mean, the object guys, sometimes they're here. I mean, great team. Many fantastic teams building on Tezos and building out those fantastic verticals, especially in art, gaming, and the collectible space. And I mean, I can see, myself being from finance, I can see the importance of DeFi. And, quite often we're asked, did you forget DeFi? Is DeFi similarly relevant to art or NFT? And in my view, I mean, DeFi is a very, very important vertical also from an infrastructure perspective.
Absolutely.
And I see us catching up now. Yeah, it's not always easy. And we've also seen that over the last couple of weeks, but I believe that I see a lot of very hard work going on in that sector as well, and I'm very positive about it.
Yeah, you've touched on a lot of very strong points, primarily the fact that Tezos is incredibly decentralized. So the foundation is sort of one piece in this really broad mosaic of all these different entities that are collectively working to build up the ecosystem, build up the community. But I think where the Tezos Foundation has an advantage, is that it is so well known amongst the community as almost like this channel of both support and connection. And so I'd like to ask how the Tezos Foundation actually connects with these projects and communities and works with them to accelerate the growth of the ecosystem. We've touched upon art, gaming, collectibles. We're looking now at kind of the rise of DeFi within Tezos. So what does the foundation's on the ground involvement actually look like when it comes to accelerating these projects?
Good question. I know we should. Look, first of all, you mentioned decentralization. I think by design, that means that we will not talk to our project. And that's okay. But I think what I try to do is that people actually can reach out. And we are trying our very, very best to answer all emails, answer all posts, try to filter those that are more serious than others, and really kind of stay in contact. One thing I've seen much more over the last couple of weeks that I love the way that has been built is this kind of, beyond legal structure, the way we kind of work on certain verticals. Take DeFi, take NFT, take art as verticals. There are organizational forms that are beyond legal structures, teams that focus on these areas. They align, they talk to each other, and we try to stay as close as possible to those vertical groups. Also because it's obviously relevant for us as well if we assess funding strategies, or if you look at the way we deploy funds, do we treat important verticals the same way? How are they tracking? How are they catching up? Do they get the right support? Is there any way that we could use, and what would be the impact if we would change some form of involvement? And so that type of vertical organization beyond legal structures I find very interesting. And we've seen it for other areas as well, right? I mean, there are wallet groups, there are groups of people that care about indexes, etc. And I think that's one way to connect. And then the other one is another thing that that really convinced me that I really love to be here is in-person meetings. I mean, the fact that COVID has relaxed is fantastic. I see many conferences coming up in summer, and I try to be part of as many as possible. And it doesn't have to be me. I mean, it's other people in the ecosystem. It's my EC colleague Mason, or it's council members, or it's other organizations. Being it from TC APAC, being it from Gulf and Connect. The ones that are kind of, but many others as well, and to stay in contact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the physical events around such a virtual technology do very much bring the community closer together and strengthen those relationships. I'm sure that's where I'm probably going to meet you face to face for the very first time in a couple of months or so. So I think it's fantastic. But of course, in terms of how the foundation connects with new developers and teams that kind of have identified Tezos as the chain that they want to build upon or that they want to support or help improve, what are sort of the mechanisms that are in place to make that onboarding process a little bit more seamless, so it comes across as an accessible ecosystem to work within?
Yeah, I mean, one platform that we fostered over the time was the grants platform, and what I really like about it, it's not always the most dynamic piece of software, but that's not because of the software; it's because of the processes that come with it. But it does enforce that all applications have to be treated. And so when you apply at the grants platform, you can be sure that someone looks at the project, assesses it together with others, and says yay or nay, but it will do it in a documented way, and that's important. But then I think, obviously email, we have a contact section on the website. I'm not such an active Twitter person, but I'm on LinkedIn, and people write me all the time, so that is certainly possible. And then again, I try to learn as much as possible, to understand as much as possible who is working on certain areas, to also make sure that interested people get the right introductions, because one thing is funding, but much more importantly, you need some form of mentoring or coaching, nursing, when you kind of get into that new ecosystem. So who kind of gives me that kickstart? And we're trying to find and facilitate these type of friendships.
So it's a very audited approach to the grant application process, which makes a lot of sense given your history. And when it actually comes to the evaluation of these proposals, how is the strength of a proposal assessed? What sort of factors are used to measure the potential of a project?
Projects are normally looked at by people that have some form of capability in an area. So I would normally, if you have proposals in the DeFi space or in the finance space or payments area or even community, that's probably projects I would look at. I would probably not assess as one of the people that assesses them projects that are, for example, very close to the core or more, application kind of, infrastructure type projects. Those would be looked at from technical people. So yes, we have a TAC. Obviously, the TAC is known. I mean, it's on the website. You can see who the members of the technical advisory committee are. But there is also other reviewers that will look at these individual grants. They will assess, factors like, do we need an infrastructure? What is already here? How could it connect? How well do we think is the team? What's the ability of the team to deliver that project? If it's for profit, is there any track record? Can we see growth that they've had before, or do they have a network that we think could be beneficial to the Tezos project?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Nothing that will really surprise you. I mean, it's the things you try to look at when you try to understand whether or not the project could add value. And if we're in doubt, then we will talk to the teams.
I just want to go back to something that you touched on a few minutes ago here, regarding sort of long-term views and building for the long term. In prepping for this podcast, I went on the Tezos Foundation website, as I always do, and I noticed that terms like long-term and marathon feature quite prominently in the language that you use there. In a like crypto space where short-term gains and losses seem to be the things that grab all the headlines, why does the TF focus its language so clearly on a wider long-term view of defining its goals?
Short-term per se is not bad. And short-term efforts are needed. And it's not that we stay away from short-term efforts. And we've seen that in the past. Sometimes you have to make a call. Sometimes you have to be present. Brand awareness is just one example, but generally to also attract and to benefit from fast growth. Fast growth normally means a duty to have an infrastructure around it, and that build may come to a much cheaper price than if you'd have to pay everything. The building of the blockchain itself is not something that will happen overnight. So if we all together want to build it in a sustainable way, we have to be aware of the fact that there will be other features that are about to come. I mean, yes, we talk about optimistic rollups at the moment. Yes, we talk about privacy not being at we still have something that needs development. Overall, some people, and I've also heard Arthur saying that once, it may take 3 to 5 years until we see some form of parity. I may quote him wrong here now, but what I'm trying to say is that the build out of the blockchain is one thing, but then if you look at it as a technology that is here for the masses, you'd also have to rethink and readapt the processes. People have to pick up these potentials. They have to build new processes. With that, you have a new environment that needs to adapt. I mean, legal matters, regulatory frameworks that will have to change. That all doesn't happen overnight. That's just a process. And if you look back in the blockchain history, I mean, Bitcoin was 2008, right? We're at quite a few years.
Only yesterday
For some of us, yeah. But so it will take some time, and we're on a very good path. But therefore, it's also important to acknowledge that we have to, and I'm just kind of more sharing my view now for the broader ecosystem, we have to focus and prepare for something that will take longer than just a couple of months in order to get there.
And it will also be a worldwide thing, right? And I also noticed and thought it was really interesting that on the website it says that the TF now counts grantees in more than 30 countries worldwide. And I was wondering, what does the Tezos Foundation do to ensure that the community grows globally across all the key markets? Is it simply a function of granting the best projects no matter where they are? Or is there an intentionality to identifying people in different markets?
I think it's a mix of both. I mean, one is, if you get a good project somewhere, this may create a big momentum. Sometimes you have a hackathon and a small guy creates some form of NFT platform that suddenly outgrows everything you thought could happen in a certain country, and then it becomes global. It's not something you can steer, but obviously it is very important to look at markets and look at how they, at what state they are from a crypto, from a blockchain perspective, therefore how active the markets there are and how much of an impact you could have, and then try to grow in those crypto blockchain friendly markets. You can do that with presences, with proximity. In Singapore, for example, in Berlin, when you have a certain market for developers, for example, or you can do it with certain projects that you fund.
So, I mean, a lot of this conversation spanned around how we ensure the strength of the technology, like the core technology, the strength of the community, the projects that are being built on it. And it always kind of comes down to how sustainable this technology really is, and making sure that all of those foundations are built and robust. But then on the other side of things, as we're approaching conversations to do with mass adoption and bridging this gap between, the technologists and the crypto native community and a mainstream audience, that's where a lot of conversations around marketing come to the fore. And so in the past 18 months or so, we've seen the Tezos logo splashed on Formula One cars. They've been on football. It's been on football jerseys. It's been on esports teams' uniforms. It's been across stadiums, art fairs worldwide. So in looking at this broad marketing effort, what do these partnerships actually represent for the Tezos brand in your eyes?
It's even on Tezos shirts, right? It's amazing.
It's even on your T-shirt.
Yeah, but wasn't there a meme once where they were random Tezos shirt people in streets and they were kind of famous people. Anyway, brand awareness is important. Brand awareness builds an element of trust. Simply said, if people know that you can work with certain large companies, they also know that you have fulfilled minimum standards or even more than minimum standards. You've been able to build that trust. And so brand awareness is important to have that growth in areas where you think you could actually have an impact. Now, I'm a believer that just having a Tezos logo somewhere without any context is difficult, right? I think one time my wife made the joke when there was, you remember after the menu launch, there was this Ronaldo video where he was playing with the Tezos shirt. And I think there were, a tremendous amount of views. And my wife said, it's fantastic. Now people need to realize what Tezos actually is, and of course, I tell them it's not a toothpaste, we're doing something different. But so you get to some element of recognition by branding, and then you need to deliver. And, looking at efforts like Canvas, for example, where you have platforms that can be leveraged that are based on these efforts, that's how I believe that's a way how we can build a successful growth angle. And with that, attract ecosystems of people that want to leverage and live and coexist with these type of engagements.
Right. So the global partnerships are essentially the first exposure to many people who are not as well versed in the community. And for community members, it's a kind of a boost of morale every single time us with it, like, as I'm sure I speak for Stu as well, whenever we as ecosystem members see the logo splash on a stadium or on Ronaldo's chest, we all take a moment to think, we're a part of that. And so I think it kind of goes both ways. And I do think marketing is something that's often scrutinized across the crypto industry, or the blockchain industry, because there does lack this substance behind the partnerships. And so how else do you see these partnerships? Sorry, I'm muddling up my words, and let me think for how I want to phrase this. You're saying that with these partnerships and like this initial exposure through branding, Tezos is making a name for itself, but you also want to back that up with something robust that actually helps explain and expose people to what this technology is, what it's capable of, and how people can get involved. So how does that actually play out when, interacting with these brands and striking up these partnerships? Are they super receptive to trying to incorporate this technology, or are they kind of looking for the standard sponsorship deal and it's more of an afterthought?
Well, there is no standard sponsorship deal that we do. It always comes to technology. I mean, there was no discussion where we said, there would just be the branding in order to make sure that people see our name. It was always that we actually think NFTs, for example, or collectibles, that they could actually make sense. And they could allow you in some form to build up something that is new. And by the way, we could build it. And then with that, we want to be seen. We want to make our people proud. We want to be proud when we see the logo. We want to be recognized as those that are able to build it. That's important. And sometimes I kind of hear that notion of it just being a marketing activity to get brand awareness and to open doors. And yes, it's important. But that's why I mentioned the example of Canvas. It's always coming together with actually using the Tezos blockchain. Sometimes that takes longer, and maybe to touch on your reception point, and sometimes it feels more natural, but sometimes it's a lot of hand-holding, and you get into examples where you see then first solutions with a credit card solution, and you're kind of like, man, no, that's exactly what we didn't want, or why did that happen? And you have to also accept that and then continue to mentor and to work together with those teams.
Absolutely. And as someone who spend so much of their time and energy thinking about how to move the Tezos ecosystem forward in a sustainable way. Where do you think we as a community still need to improve? Like, what would you like to see more of / less of moving forward?
I think it would be easier to answer that question after all the summer meetings where we met in person. I think generally, like, I mean, the community is very, very active, and there are things that I still see. No, not still, that I see today. You know, I said that I made that example at the beginning with the Nomadic Labs guys that were so excited about the tech and the launch in a situation where they probably didn't know whether they get the salary. And now sometimes you're sitting in a room together with a couple of people, and then there is an upgrade coming, and laptop gets out, what's happening. And so that excitement and that actually that contribution, that's fantastic. And I really hope that spirit and that positivity continues, and that this is one big part of our success. Well, I'm sure that this is actually one part of our success. I mean, one thing I try to, it's always hard, right? I mean, it's easy to say, you should do this, and this, and what do you do, right? But what I try to do is, we have a chain that works incredibly well. We can use it, so use it. And what I mean by that is, if we don't, sometimes with our neighbors, we set up wallets, and then you get that kind of feedback of how people feel when they interact with Tezos, with wallets, with crypto transactions for the first time. Often it's crypto, the blockchain. It's not just Tezos, because hardly ever someone says, I'm always on Ethereum. Just explain me Tezos. Most of the time I'm entirely new to blockchain. That's kind of the adoption that we have. More on connectivity in general, when we get tools, use tools, support tools, be open with feedback, help teams. And we, I mean, myself, so reading things, trying to benchmark activities and applications. Are we, have we built tech, or are we actually competitive with the product? Especially in DeFi, that's very, very significant, right? If you do some form of borrowing and lending, and if your conditions are not good enough, you're not getting any flow. I mean, then you have two hurdles: new technology plus less attractive conditions. Why would anyone ever change? And that type of benchmarking, that challenging, that community work around, building those tools together and helping each other. That's certainly something that will remain very, very important. Art. As I said before, I'm not such an art person. Gaming as well. I mean, listening to people from the art vertical and how they think about, galleries, what leverages of Art Basel. Even that is interesting for me to understand. Why do you have something like an Art Basel, even in the traditional sense, and how does it help you to evolve? But then, or to develop new solutions. And then just recently I talked to Misan, and you may have seen the announcement of Misan Harriman and his collection efforts that he will do on Tezos. And he shares his view about Web3 and how he could change some of the artists' life. And it's the same direction, right? How do you bring people to use the technology? How do you show them that there is something new that actually does something different? And I think that is what is amazing and what we should continue to do.
Absolutely. And obviously that's a big part of what we do here at TezTalks. And we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that the Tezos Foundation has backed what we do here at TezTalks since our inception. What do you think the benefit is of having people like Marissa and I here talking to the people working on Tezos and broadcasting what they're doing for the world?
I mean, to explain it to people, you need more than a couple of tech nerds and an auditor. I mean, it's so easy to start talking about words and techniques or tools or things that no one understands anymore, and that's the big benefit of what you do here, right? I mean, or other media type activities as well, right? To translate what we're trying to do, to explain what we're doing, and to allow people with a different educational background to build an own view. And That's what I really appreciate. Besides
Yeah, I
our
think
good,
it is.
of course. I mean,
Always down for a great chat. And yeah, I think that translation piece is absolutely critical. And we're just, one of many initiatives that are geared towards helping bridge this gap in understanding from the ecosystem to the non-crypto native community. One thing I do want to touch upon, just because you did just mention it, is this commitment and in partnership with Misan Harriman to create a permanent NFT collection with, I think it was £1 million or €1 million.
pounds.
So can you share a bit more about this initiative that was just announced, I believe, last week?
We've been introduced by a dear community member to Misan and his values and vision of life, and what he. Well, first of all, he's already incredibly active in the NFT space. He's a very well-known photographer, and he has a wonderful view of talking to his community about why and how he does, how he uses also Web3 for empowering young artists, and so we heard that Misan actually wanted to create a collection that should not be traded, but actually should be kind of used as a recognition of good artists. With very often in the Web3 context, we talk about disintermediation and the fact that you can be present, you can use something that probably was not reachable for you before, and in art it works wonderful, right? Everybody can mint its NFTs. Everybody can talk about them, trade them, and to recognize new artists from areas of the world that probably I don't want to say ignore, but probably have not been in a focus in traditional art before, like Africa, like Asia, obviously the European and Western Northern American parts normally are covered quite well, to allow that diversity in such a beautiful way was really exciting to us. So for us it's a fantastic opportunity to work with someone or to talk to someone who has a wonderful view of explaining Web3 in a non-technical way, to have an impact, a say, a voice on Tezos, and to acknowledge a wonderful ecosystem of young, new, creative artists that do incredibly impressive pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly exciting project, and I do think it's a great way to illustrate the diversity that does exist in Tezos already, and also bring more diversity to it. And I mean, on top of this latest initiative, what sort of other projects does the foundation have oversight over that you are personally most excited about? Is there anything you can share here on TezTalks Radio?
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of our big projects is TezTalks. I mean, that's one I can think of. I mean, look,
we like that.
No, I mean, of course we like TezTalks, but generally there is many activities that can be mentioned here. Wherever we get more proximity, and again, where you come from sometimes defines some proximity. Therefore, it's important that we have different people looking at things. In the ECT Foundation, we have Mason and myself. Probably Mason is less DeFi than I am, so I'm probably closer to some of the DeFi development, and I can see how people really fight hard in order to make a change and to have an impact and to attract, volumes on chain and to build solutions, and that power, that idea, that kind of amount of idea is impressive. And you would see similar activities in gaming as well, where I can see lots of very good activities are built. Actually, gaming as a vertical I find really fascinating. I was not worried, but it was a very interesting reaction after the Ubisoft launch, where some of the gamers were not as optimistic as one would have hoped, and how they kind of turned around from there, where people actually started to understand, how could he create the value, how do we have to build it that it actually makes a difference, and then you start to build, and that's what's happening with lots of energy. So quite excited about it as well.
Very cool. We could go on forever. but we are coming to the end here. I just wanted to say thanks so much for joining us today. It's always so great to hear from the people working behind the scenes in the Tezos ecosystem and helping us advance the Tezos cause and keep us at the forefront of the blockchain revolution. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on? Anything you'd like to plug before we sign off here?
Well, thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Stu, for your invitation. I think at the end, the foundation boils down to roughly 20 people that aim to focus as hard as possible to fulfill their mandate. They focus on being transparent. They're aware that they have certain aspects that other entities don't have. They try to do it in a way that is not isolated. There are no isolated decisions where a president or a figure could take some form of single decision that would outrule others. That's not how we work, and that's not how we operate. And as we said before, we are approachable, continue to talk. Yes, we're not always able to answer all of the questions on the different chat forums, but we care about them, and it's good to hear the views and the ideas. And so, yeah, I think that's what I would love to say, right? Let's keep that communications open. I can promise that we will continue to fight together to deliver that foundation result, to become a trusted foundation. It will still remain a foundation, but a trusted foundation. And you please continue to give us feedback, and let's keep the conversation open.
Absolutely.
Very well put. Thank you so much, Roman. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.